Hi everyone, this is Ann Bennett, Executive Director of the Laurel Historical Society in Maryland, and this is another one-take tour mobile version of our tour of the Laurel Museum. And this is going to be kind of a remote version of the tour that you would see if you were able to come here to the Laurel Museum yourself. So I'm going to be taking the camera around here to show you some of the great items that we have in our collection here. And this home life section was really great because it's a way for us to showcase some of the things that are unique about Laurel, but also the things that are recognizable and have connections to people who come into our museum, regardless if you are born and raised or lived in Laurel. So a lot of these things you'll recognize regardless of what your hometown is. And one of the great things that stood out to us as we pan the camera around here is the way that over the last 150 years, technology has really changed. And these are all forms of communication if you look at it. So in the very back here, we have pens and pencils and note cards and a postage stamp from the late 1800s as a way to keep in communication. But we also have a typewriter dating from about the 1920s, the old, very classic royal typewriter with the round button keys, the manual return up at the top, and the ribbons up as the type ribbons as well. In the front, we also have another fun piece. We have a rotary telephone, and it's not a press button or anything like that related to your smartphone. It is a rotary, so you would have to put your finger in the hole that corresponds to your number. You'd have to drag it all the way around to the right or clockwise, and then you'd have to wait for the dial to reset all the way back before you could dial your another number. So if you had a 9 or a 0 in your phone number, it would take a long time to dial that back. One of the other things that I really like and it was fun to showcase is this old computer from 1987. We didn't have to look very far to put this on display because this was actually a part of the Laurel Historical Society. So this was one of the machines that the board members and volunteers would use during the 80s when they were documenting and processing the collection for the Laurel Historical Society. And we have a stack of old floppy disks in the front here and the 5 1/4 floppy drive, in contrast to the small tiny flash drive you see there, stating that this tiny thing that you can put into your pocket would take the place of hundreds of these small floppy disks from the 80s. We also have some family photos on display here, just as many families would typically have across their mantle, showcasing different time periods from around the turn of the century to the 1950s, looking inside the home for Christmas, or gathering outside by the Patuxent River and going camping, or just having a professional photograph taken. I like this because it really captures an array of families, different family and home life settings, and just the connection that you have with your family and friends. And if we move over here into the cubby, we can see again, there's a lot of things that are familiar to us. So we have teapots and tea kettles that we still have today. So even though these date from the 1930s and 40s and 50s, it's still familiar to any visitor. We have a couple of our cookbooks from our collection on display. We have sewing kits, again, that are going to be familiar to a lot of people, whether they're from Laurel or not. And one of the fun things that we have on display here is the old-fashioned stereoscope. So this was a pastime around the turn of the century in the late 1800s where you could find a card that had a left image and a right image, and when you put it into this stereoscopic viewer, it kind of pushes the images together so it has a 3D effect. And if that sounds familiar to you, then you probably grew up in the 70s and 80s and had a Viewmaster with different pictures in it. And this is one of the examples that we have of the toys that you can still get today with a modern version of our Viewmaster. So if I come here into our final area of the exhibits, we'll see some items that document very momentous occasions in people's lives for two very different reasons. We can see kind of the display on the left. We have a wedding dress from Maud Phelps in her 1923 marriage to Norris Bell. And so we have that kind of on display as if a bride might have just put her wedding gown on the bed ready to get into it and then on married for that day. And it's very fashionable. It has nice heavy beading in the front, the fashionable dropped waist that would be commonly associated with the Jazz Age fashions. And what's really great is we're able to kind of document their marriage. So we have not only their marriage certificate on the left, but we have their marriage invitation and a picture of the couple as well. So that's Maud and Norris there. And then we have examples of other momentous occasions, but this documents the World War II in Laurel. So we have examples of different ration cards for gas, for food, for clothing, we have framed there. And we also have a very special connection to the war with this house jacket. And this is made of synthetic silk that was made into a jacket from parachute fabric. So the significant other of the person who made this jacket had the parachute saved from his time serving in World War II and was able to bring it home, and she made it into something special as a keepsake for her and her time, remembering this momentous occasion of World War II and the response of her family, and the community. So I hope you enjoyed your tour of the home life section of Laurel, and let us know what you think.